again. This is Miss Fleming, and you are here for Newfoundland and Labrador Studies 2205, Unit 2, The Roots of Our Culture, Section 2, Lesson 3, Economics of the Migratory Fishery. Let's talk money. Before we begin, I have a couple of concepts I want to make sure that we can follow. The migratory fishery promised rich rewards for investors, but was a very risky business. The industry became tumultuous and lacked regulations until the Western Charter. Tumultuous, ooh, that's a new word. Tumultuous meaning very, very risky. Conflict, possibility of very high risks, chaotic almost. All in all, high risk equals high reward, and that's a very important message to remember when it comes to the economics of the fishery. So the most successful merchants became very wealthy. Some owned 15 to 20 ships and large properties. But bankruptcies were also frequent with all the risks of the trade. You see, merchants had to spend large sums of money to prepare their vessels for the fishing season, and had to wait a long time for a return on their investment. So let's talk about those risks specifically. If fish weren't sold, there was no way to recoup the investment. None. Delays in selling were frequent, as ships might get wrecked or seized by pirates, which is true, or by enemy ships during wartime. Markets could close due to conflict or disease, and exchange rates could change abruptly, like without any notice. But, of course, there was also possible reward. In 1633, it was estimated that a 100-ton ship with a crew of 40 could catch and process 2,000 quintals of dry cured fish and 100 quintals of green cured fish. The profits from this could pay for the vessel, wages for the fishermen, their food and provisions, and give the owner of the vessel a hefty profit as well. Now, here's another new word, quintal. When you look at it, you might assume that it's pronounced quintal, but no, it's pronounced quintal, kind of like kettle with an N. And 1 quintal is equal to about 112 pounds. So let's do the math. 2,000 quintals of dried fish is 224,000 pounds. Then 100 quintals of green fish was 11,200 pounds. That's a lot of fish. Let's talk about risk management, because of course with risks, you have to have a risk management plan. So there were some steps that could be taken to reduce the risk for merchants. One was to exercise strict supervision of their vessels by employing a fishing master. Fishing masters had a reputation for being hard drivers and would go on the voyage with the crew to ensure they stayed in line, that they stayed productive. Another strategy to manage risk was to hire relatives in senior positions in the operation, such as the captains for their ships or overseers, as they could be trusted to look out for the merchant's best interests. Risks could also be shared with the crew by paying them a share of the value of the fish that they caught instead of wages. So, you want to make a lot of money? Make sure that you catch a lot of fish because your pay was reliant on it. But eventually this strategy became difficult, as men would not be as willing to work without guaranteed payment. So after 1700, all English vessels paid their crews with wages. They couldn't hire fishermen without doing so. Merchants also began the practice of outfitting a small resident population to stay in Newfoundland after the season was over. This small group worked on credit and accepted their fish as payment after the season had ended. The advantage for them, of course, was that the merchant could acquire their season's fish without having to outfit his own crew. So between those that overwintered and this group, the buyboat keepers, both of those occurrences contributed to permanent European settlement. A third class of fishermen arose in the late 1600s called buyboat keepers. They were an independent group of fishermen. They came as passengers on sack ships and fished on their own account. They left their boats by in the winter when they went home. They were middle-class adventurers and sometimes called yeomen of the fishery. Buyboat keepers generally sold their fish to the sack ships returning to Europe. So the advantages of this system were that they didn't have to buy a ship. They found it easier to get a small crew and could produce fish more cheaply because of that. They took on less risk. Often buyboat keepers hired men to overwinter with the gear left behind, of course, to protect it. Many only stayed for a season or two, but later in the 1700s, this practice contributed to permanent settlements. So the men who overwintered for the buyboat keepers or overwintered for merchants started bringing their families, and we'll talk about that in the permanent settlement lessons. So now it's time to review. I have some activities for you in Brightspace on economics, and I'll see you in the next one.